Hello and welcome to the Soberful podcast. I'm Veronica Valli and it's a solo episode today. I'm going to be talking about how an alcohol problem really shows up. I'm hoping in this episode I'm going to clear up some kind of misinformation about what an alcohol problem really is and what sobriety really means and why ultimately stopping drinking is 10% not drinking alcohol, 90% emotional sobriety. And I'm going to explain what all of that means. One of the things that clients say to me when they get on a call is, if my friends knew I was signing up for a sobriety program, they wouldn't believe it. They would think that's crazy. Nobody thinks I have a problem. That's fairly common. And the reason for that is an alcohol problem shows up on the inside years before it shows up on the outside. So we have been led to believe in our cultures. And when I say cultures, I mean UK, Europe, North America, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. Generally speaking, those cultures. We think an alcohol problem is visible, that we can see it, that we generally think an alcohol problem is a homeless person drinking out of a brown paper bag. We think an alcohol problem is someone who's getting multiple DUIs and can't hold down a job due to their drinking. Those are things that we can visually see. Maybe the person who's always falling over drunk, that kind of stuff. Now, those things are certainly an alcohol problem. But the thing is, an alcohol problem shows up internally before it shows up on the outside. So what do I mean by that? An alcohol problem shows up in how we feel inside, and we can mask all of that. It shows up in feelings of shame, guilt, self-loathing, fear, resentment. It shows up with that constant arguing with yourself. It's like a buzzing in your ear, isn't it? Of, am I going to have a drink today? Should I take a day off? Does anyone notice how much I drink? What would they think if I don't drink? I could just have two. I could just manage it. I'm sure it would be different this time. I've had a little break, but maybe I shouldn't. But I want to. It's been such a hard week. Like, I deserve, it's Friday. I mean, for God's sake, like 2 glasses of wine. That's not gonna. Have you had that like constant narration going on in your brain, arguing with yourself about whether you're going to have a drink or whether you're not going to have a drink? We can disguise that. So people don't see what's going on inside of us, just like we can't see what's going on inside of other people. And lots of us are living lives of incongruence. What that means is our insides and our outsides don't match. What we feel on the inside about ourselves, about our lives, is very different to what we project on the outside to other people. So lots of people will look at us and think, you're fine, right? You've got a house and a nice car and you go on a nice holiday and, just you seem all right. But they can't see what's really going on in the inside. And the internal problem can go on for years before it shows up externally. Now, it's very interesting because it shows up externally differently with people. So one of my earliest memories of drinking alcohol was I was 15 years old. And it was very normal in my culture in the late 80s in the UK. I was going in bars and pubs with my friends. By the time I was like, just before I turned 15, 14, 15, I mean, it's just unbelievably shocking to me now. But we couldn't wait to get into the world of grown-ups, and we couldn't wait to get into the world of having fun. And that was being role modeled all around us. The alcohol and being drunk was the best way to have fun, and we couldn't wait to do that. And being Generation X, none of us were supervised. We were basically feral. And I remember being in a pub in England, and it was this was back in the day when pubs used to close by 11 o'clock. And sometimes you could be in a pub, and if you knew the owner, they would do what's called a lock-in, and they would close the blinds and they would serve you after the licensing hours. And I knew the owner of this pub because he was the brother of a family I used to babysit for. And I remember being in this pub having a lock-in and drinking, and I was with some friends. And I remember sitting there and the room began to spin and everyone began to seem very far away. And I kind of knew that I could kind of almost feel myself going into the blackout. The next thing I knew, I wake up outside the pub, literally lying in the gutter, covered in my own vomit, with the landlord throwing a bucket of water over me. And I had this, I mean, it was terrifying. I was a 15-year-old child. And apparently I said I was going to throw up, and I sort of kind of made it outside. I mean, I was such a liability. And I remember having this thought that this isn't right. This is not right. And I somehow made it home, and everybody around me told me that that was the best night ever. My friends in my age group told me that I was like the funnest, the wildest, the craziest. And I really wanted to be that person. So my brain then crossed out that whole, there's something wrong with being 15 years old, lying in the gutter covered in your own vomit, and replaced it with, this is how to have the best night ever. And my subconscious mind absorbed that and believed it. Interestingly, I do remember the couple who I used to babysit for, who's the brother who owned the pub, were horrified with me and they said to me, we won't have you babysit our children anymore. And it's interesting because I used to babysit for them a lot, and because they used to go out a lot drinking. And it's like I'd crossed the line. You can drink and you can get drunk, but you cannot get that drunk. And so I felt a lot of intense shame. And I remember my mum sort of like, why aren't you babysitting, for that family? And kind of, I don't know, making something up, because I felt such shame that I had been seen that way, and I'd crossed the line. I hadn't managed my drinking. And the golden rule was, you have to manage your drinking, right? You have to drink. You have to drink a lot. You have to drink on every occasion. You have to be drunk sometimes to have real fun, but it still has to be managed. And if you cross that line and it's not managed, then whoa, shame on you. And I just felt so much shame. So my alcohol problem, that's an external, like anybody looking at that with any sense would say that's an alcohol problem, a 15-year-old child drinking in that way. That's my dog Cadbury barking in the background, if you can hear it on the podcast. And I had quite a few messy episodes like that. And I was just about able to keep a handle on it, just about. A lot of it was youth, like you can kind of get away with it. I did get fired from a job because I wasn't showing up. But mostly I quit jobs before I got fired. Mostly I was kind of skimming along, smoke and mirrors, able to kind of disguise what was really happening. And one way I did that was I sort of had lots of friendship groups, right, that I'd go drinking with. I had the friendship group from work, and the friendship group from college, and the friendship group from high school or whatever. And I would drink with all of them, but they didn't see the continuation of it. I was with one group one night and another group the other night. And what I know nobody could see was how I felt on the inside. And the only way I can describe it is I was dying on the inside. I was very, very lost. And I felt very, very alone. And that's really interesting because I was pretty much always around people. Mostly. I definitely had periods of loneliness where I felt like I didn't have anybody, but it was relatively easy in your early 20s to be around people and have groups and people going out. But I always felt like I was behind a glass screen watching everybody get on with their lives. And I just felt completely lost and alone and broken. And then on top of that, I had really bad anxiety and panic attacks that started from when I was 18 from some drug use, and my drinking changed to needing alcohol to manage my feelings. And that's one of the things that happens with our relationship with alcohol, where we cross a line and where it becomes a problem, right? We go into our drinking believing that it's going to be a benefit, it's going to be great, it's going to be fun, going to help us relax, going to help us bond with other people. That's why all of us go into our relationship with alcohol. Nobody goes into a relationship with alcohol believing that it's going to be problematic, which is why when we cross the line, nobody can see the line. I know you think you can see the line. Nobody can see the line. And what happens is there's a subtle change from using and abusing alcohol because we believe it's fun and exciting and we're connecting with people, to needing it to cope. And what happens gradually is we outsource managing our emotions to alcohol because we lose the ability to do that. Or in my case, we never learnt it in the first place. The reason that alcohol was so attractive to me and why I loved it from the word go is it made me feel comfortable in my own skin. It made me feel, I felt good enough. I felt like fun and happy and pretty and good enough. And I didn't feel like that in my normal everyday life at all. So I'd found the solution. And I wonder if it was the same experience for you as well. So something very crucial happens there when we outsource managing our emotions to alcohol. A lot of us just don't grow up in families where we role model how to manage our feelings and emotions. It's just not role modeled to us. Our parents just didn't have that ability, or our wider communities. It's not role modeled how to have boundaries, or how to say things that are sometimes uncomfortable, or how to ask for your needs to be met, or how to deal with frustration or disappointment or fear. Those are all life skills that we all need to be successful in life. Just like being able to tie your shoelaces and being able to write and being able to cook some food. They're just life skills. How to navigate these complex feelings and emotions as we go about our daily life. And I had no clue. It just wasn't role model to me. So alcohol worked. Alcohol worked in being able to deal with all of that stuff. But then what happens as you go along is in life, we are given multiple options to grow and change, to learn life lessons, right? Life, it's just one big lesson. The lesson never stops. It never goes away. And once you've learned a lesson, another lesson will come on. So we often miss opportunities to learn all of these really important life skills and lessons. I remember being at university and I was dating a guy and I could tell it was kind of coming to an end, and he broke up with me on the phone, and I put the phone down and my next thought was, this is a 2 bottle of wine job, because I could see the tsunami of grief, shame, self-loathing, fear of being abandoned and being alone coming towards me. I could see it coming towards me, and I genuinely believed that I would not survive it. And the only way I knew how to deal with those really difficult and uncomfortable feelings coming towards me was to just numb and run. And I went down to the off license and I got my 2 bottles of wine, made a joke about guests coming over, so the person in the off license didn't think that it was just for me. So original. And drank it because I didn't want to feel, and I didn't know a better way to deal with how I was feeling. And then you just mask it, oh yeah, we broke up, like I just would always pretend that everything was okay. And in the inside of me, it really wasn't. And that's just a horrible, horrible way to live. One of the things that happens when we have a problem with alcohol, and again, this happens over time and we don't notice it, is we leave ourselves by degrees. We just abandon ourselves. And we wake up one day and we become someone that we really don't recognize. This is not who I am. I'm not someone who gets drunk and throws up over themselves. I'm not someone who doesn't show up for their job. I'm not someone who lies and manipulates because they're scared of showing people who they really are. Like, I woke up and I just realized the feeling of discomfort was so acute because I had left myself so long ago and become someone I didn't recognize. And I want to say, I think that is one of the most painful parts of having an alcohol problem. It's extremely painful to realize that you are behaving in ways in the world and saying stuff that is just not in alignment with yourself. I was manipulative. I was certainly dishonest and lied. I was a false friend. I was a people pleaser. I was quite fake. None of those things, that isn't who I am, but yet that's who I became, and that's how I behaved, and that's how I showed up in the world, and that's how people experienced me. People experienced me as that kind of person, which makes it even worse, right? When people just have this very different view of you from who you really know you are in your heart. So the journey of sobriety is the journey back to yourself. That's really what it's about. This is why it's only 10% not drinking. Emotional sobriety is the journey back to yourself. Because it's really hard to live in this life having abandoned yourself. You're going to need an anesthetic. I'll tell you, you're going to need an anesthetic because it's just painful. The older I get, I think more and more about, I have more time behind me than ahead of me, and how I don't want to miss my life. I want to be just so fully present in what life has to offer. And I want to be authentic and connected to myself because I have lived that way now for well over 20 years and I've lived the other way. And I'm going to tell you, there's just no comparison. There's no comparison to getting to a point where you feel fully connected with who you really are. And then you like yourself again. That is one of the most incredible gifts of sobriety, is that you like yourself again. And it's really hindsight and contrast that I just didn't realize at the time that I didn't. When I was living and I was so uncomfortable in my own skin, I didn't know that there was another way to be. I didn't know that there was another path. So because an alcohol problem shows up on the inside long before anyone else can see it, we can try and trick ourselves into believing it's not that bad. That we rationalize and justify our drinking over and over by looking at the mirrors around us. And we do surround ourselves with mirrors. Generally speaking, we surround ourselves with people who drink the way that we do, right? I didn't want to go out and drink with someone who had one glass of wine. I wanted to go out and drink with someone who was going to order the second bottle. So we look at them and we look at their outsides and we go, they're all right. They're fine. I'm fine. If they're fine, I'm fine. But that's not the question. It's a trick question when we say to ourselves, is my drinking that bad? My drinking isn't that bad. What does that even mean? You can easily find someone whose drinking is worse than yours. That's easy. And then we go, oh, I'm not that bad, so I'm fine. That's denial. It's a rationalization. The question that we have to ask ourselves is my drinking bad? The question that we need to ask ourselves is this life good enough the way that I've been living it? Because that will provoke a completely different response. Like, is this good enough for you? The hangovers, the anxiety, the obsession with whether you're going to have a drink or not, the thinking about drinking, the self-loathing, the lying to people, the projecting one thing on the outside with something completely different on the inside. Is that good enough for you? That is the question. That is the question. Because alcohol, it steals our bandwidth. Without us really knowing or realizing, we begin to sacrifice our bandwidth to alcohol. Bandwidth is your energy and your space to think thoughts. Because when we have an alcohol problem, we do 4 things. We drink, we think about drinking, we think about not drinking, and we recover from drinking. That's what an alcohol problem is. And for me, the defining characteristic is the thinking about not drinking. Only people who have a problem with alcohol think about not drinking it. People who don't have a problem with alcohol, it doesn't rent any space in their heads. They don't think about it. They just get on with their day and have a drink every so often. It's the thinking about not drinking that is the giveaway. And when you do those 4 things, that is stealing bandwidth, energy and space to think thoughts. You're sacrificing 20, 30, 40, 50% of your bandwidth to alcohol. Now, when you look at it from that perspective, the next question is, are you getting a good return on your investment? Is the amount of bandwidth you are sacrificing to alcohol worth it? And I'm going to guess it's probably not. At the time when I was drinking, I would tell you, like the hangovers in particular, it was worth it. In hindsight, I'm going to go, not really. I mean, it was just a messy night, talking rubbish. I danced a bit. It really wasn't worth the cost. It wasn't worth the sacrifice of bandwidth. And here's the thing, as we age, the cost of our drinking is only going to increase. It's not going to decrease. It's just going to keep getting higher. But the great news is, when you get sober, you get that bandwidth back. And here's what I want you guys to know. In that bandwidth is where your extraordinariness is. When you get access and you can live with 100% of your bandwidth, you are not filled with shame or self-loathing or guilt or arguing with yourself, blah, 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 blah. When all of that has gone, imagine what you could do with your life. Imagine who you could be. That's where your extraordinariness is. And that's what you've come here to be and do, by the way. You did not come here to live your life arguing with yourself about whether you're going to have a glass of Chardonnay tonight or not. There's just so much more. And that's why sobriety is such a gift. It is, I think it's like a secret. It's like a secret. A lot of people, it's a superpower that just most people don't realize. Because so many people are still, just like we were, just like I was, still fully committed to the belief that alcohol is the best way to have fun, excitement, belonging, connection, to relax and to reward yourself. And if I don't have alcohol, then I can't have those things. And if I can't have those things, what's the point? Because those things are great. Who wants to live a life without those things? That's what I thought when I stopped drinking at 27. I absolutely knew my life was going to be boring, grey and dull forever because alcohol was the best way to have fun, and that was a fact. And none of that's true. None of it. It's a perception. We have a perception of what alcohol brings us, and we have deliberately obscured the cost of it. You can have all of those things: fun, excitement, belonging, connection, relax and reward yourself without alcohol, and it's better. That's the really good news. And that's what I want for all of you listening to this podcast. I hope this has helped you kind of weed out the truth about your drinking and what's really going on, and all of the complicated rationalizations and smoke and mirrors that we do in trying to justify our drinking and manage it. Oh God, that's the holy grail, right? If only I could manage it. We can't manage it. Alcohol is unmanageable, and alcohol will manage us. So there's just so much more to having a drinking problem than people initially think. And the hill that I die on is emotional sobriety. That emotional sobriety is the pathway, not to just staying sober forever, but to a whole new life. That's the great thing that most people don't realize. This deal, the work that I do with my clients, my coaching programs, my book, the podcast that I do with Chip, the whole deal here is it's so much more than just not drinking alcohol. It's about the development of oneself. It's about the knowing of oneself. It's about being fully connected with oneself. That is the deal. That is the bit that you're going to miss out on if all you do is just try and stop drinking alcohol, because there's so much more and it's so worth it. If you want to find out the different ways of working with me and getting emotional sobriety, just go to my website, soberful.com, or my Instagram, Veronica J. Valli, or my Facebook group, Soberful. And let me know what you think about this episode. Let me know what you identify with, what you relate to, and how this experience has been for you. And wherever you are in your sober journey, keep going. I promise you it's worth it. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.